How much would you have to love someone to travel into the underworld and bring them back from the dead? I can think of at least one person, and that's why today at the Bureau of Curiosity we're talking about mythology. So, I don't remember where I saw this question, but it was, is there a figure from mythology that you particularly resonate with? And for me, the answer was immediate, and there wasn't even much of a runner up. That figure is Orpheus, who was a figure from Greek mythology. He was a wizard and a musician who played the lyre, which was a like a harp-like instrument, and sang, with an incredibly beautiful voice, this mysterious music that was so powerful. He was able to charm Cerberus, the three-headed dog who guarded the underworld. And with his song, he was actually able to convince the king and the queen of the underworld to release his dead wife Eurydice to return to the living world with him. I won't give away the end. It's a wonderful myth. And the reason I think that I and a lot of artists really resonate with the Orpheus myth is that it tracks very nicely onto what it is to be an artist and a musician. It's to sort of go into the underworld, which is to say, like the psyche or the subconscious or your internal thoughts, and hopefully find treasure, fight your way back up to the living world, bringing that treasure with you in the form of art. So the question today is, can you use the idea of a myth and or the persona associated with it, in this case Orpheus, to create a credible piece of music? Okay, so in thinking about this, my first thought was, well, he plays the lyre and he sings. So the piece of music that I'm going to write will have only those two elements. So since I play the guitar, I was thinking, is there a way of evoking the lyre on that instrument? And I found a helpful video, which I will link below, where this gentleman is demonstrating the tuning of a lyre, the six-string version, which is helpful because I'm going to be mapping it to a six-string guitar. So a lyre tuning from low to high is G, A, B, C, D, E. And I remembered that I have this device, which I've had but never really used, and here seems like a good opportunity to do so. This thing here across the third fret of my guitar is called a spider capo, and that differs from a regular capo in the sense that it can be individual strings stopped down as opposed to barring across an entire fret. So it has a series of levers, and you can either choose them to be down or leave that string open. So with the help of the spider capo, I brought any of the strings that could be rectified at the third fret up to the lyre tuning, and then anything that I couldn't get in that way, I just retuned those strings. The next order of business would be to think about, the equipment I want to use. And for this, I decided to give myself a limitation. My guitar style relies heavily on the whammy bar, and most of my guitars have it. I decided to, for the purposes of invoking a lyre, which does not have a whammy bar, that I would use this guitar. This is a headless X-Star from the 80s, which has a fixed tailpiece and gets a really nice clean sound, which is what I'm going to be using. The fixed bridge maybe gives me a little bit more ring out and sustain. And then the other thing is I was just going to go, straight to an amp. The next thing that came to mind in the idea of a persona was Jeff Buckley. There was something, tragic and mythological about his life in the first place. A very short but brilliant career. And when I think of him doing Hallelujah, there's something very much of the mythic involved. It's just, one person singing and playing the guitar. He had an otherworldly voice which was capable of great things. I had also just happened to come across Andy Wallace talking about how he was able to get the sound of his guitar on Hallelujah. I also found another wonderful video from this very popular YouTuber who used two reverb pedals to try to simulate what Andy Wallace had done in the studio. But it comes down to basically running clean sound. In Buckley's case, that was probably a Telecaster into a Fender Twin, but then into 3 separate reverbs, which are blended after the fact. A very short one, a medium length one, and a long one. The next thing I wanted to tackle was whether I wanted to be a plotter or a pantser. Now, that's a writing term that comes up which delineates 2 different ways of, say, writing a novel. There are plotters who will sort of outline every chapter and then kind of go in sequence and write away like that with a sort of firm structure in mind. And then there's a pantser, which is somebody who's sort of going by the seat of their pants. They begin at the beginning. They don't necessarily know where it's going to go. They allow themselves to be surprised by things that happen and things that the characters either want to say or do. And so I wanted to apply that dynamic to the compositional process, which means, did I want to sit down and with this new tuning, come up with something that, is straight up composition, or did I kind of want to let my fingers do the walking in this very unfamiliar territory? Remember, I'm now in a new tuning, so every note is now not where I'm used to it being, which is a really nice metaphor for Orpheus descending into the underworld where everything is disorienting and nothing is the same as it is in the living world. I decided that I wanted to go ahead and do the pantsing because my hope was that in navigating this unfamiliar tuning, combined with what experience I do have on the guitar and idiomatic things I do, that I would come up with sort of some happy accidents and surprises. So for the vocals, of course, Jeff Buckley is in mind, but he's 1 in a billion. So I was going to draw on whatever vocal abilities I had to sort of try to come up with something that is strange and ethereal and sort of mythic or legendary. And the approach I went for this is also kind of like the guitar, very bare bones in a way. So what I did was set up this very simple rack in Guitar Rig where I had some 4-inch shifters, a long delay which I could reverse, and a couple of things where I would just be vocalizing and just mousing on the controls on the screen in real time and capturing that output. So the plan was to record the guitar first, edit that up, and then once I had sort of made a convincing backbone, then do the vocal takes. So let's go take a look at the session and see how I did. Okay, so here's what it looked like after I played in 7 tracks of the guitar. And one other thing I should mention is that after 3 takes, I decided to pick up a slide and play some slide guitar. And I didn't do that to play any kind of bottleneck slide or anything like that. It was just a way of adding a little bit of strangeness to the pitch, almost a microtonal kind of a thing, which would add hopefully to the idea of myth, legend, and mystery. So here's just a little bit of what I was doing by just hitting like a few notes on the slide to kind of get those weird microtonal things going. So it almost sounds like some sort of weird audio effect, but what it really is just me warping the pitches analog old school style. And here's just a quick look at the idea that I picked up from Andy Wallace, which is that here's one of the guitar tracks. Each of these is an aux send. This is a short reverb, medium reverb, and a long reverb. And each of them is being bussed in there separately. So the next order of business is to take out what are the nicest bits. Like I said, I was going to do seat of my pants, go through these and edit them down. So here you see I've taken out what I consider to be the best bits of, what looks like I went long on one of these, but the basic gist of it is about 7 minutes long. One more thing is that here you see I decided to have one guitar going at one time, just one guitar, one voice. But inevitably, I see a thing and I see one cool part above another cool part. And at some point, I decided to throw them on and realized that I could make it sound like an amazing guitar part if I was very careful about not having them play things that would be obviously impossible to do with one set of hands. As I'm invoking Orpheus and he's a mythical figure, maybe he's got some extra fingers or just the magic of the gods in there. But what I decided to do was to go ahead and say, I'll suspend my one guitar at a time. I'll make it sound like one guitar at a time, but like you wonder, man, how did somebody get that in there? Could be Alan Holdsworth stopped by. But so here we wind up with the guitar part, which is essentially two guitars that are very carefully placed so that they sound like one. And because I also can't leave well enough alone, I had two processing ideas that I wanted to throw in there too. So what I did was I took the two guitars that are one amazing guitar, bounced them all down, reversed the whole thing, and fed it into the reverb sends. And then I used my ghost note to just very gradually ride up these things so that they just kind of pop in for a hair. I'll pick out one that's a little more obvious. Here's another. And what that does is kind of, again, just adds a layer of mystery. Like, is that a note ringing out? How did that happen? Is that some technique that I don't really know about? And one idea that didn't make the cut was taking the same thing, which was, again, these two bounce down, and I dropped it the whole octave to see if I could add in some sort of like low end to the guitar part, but it took away from me the idea of it sounding like a harp or a lyre, and eventually I bounced that out. And then I added the vocals. And again, I did 5 takes. You see them paired up because the top is the vocal clean just going in, and the bottom one is the output of the guitar rig that I was fiddling with the effects in real time. So if I bring up the guitar rig aux, you can see the very simple rig I put together and was singing through. I had an auto filter and I was kind of messing with the low and high pass band filter and the resonance. There's a formant filter, which might have been what pushed me towards doing some sort of the kind of like the harmonic singing where you can actually have a note, and then if you point the sound at the back of your palette, you can create a harmonic. I did a little bit of that. Psych delay, where I was messing with the time and the feedback and the mix of dry and wet, but always in reverse. And lastly, I used the tractor delay, which also has freezing options and stuff like a filter, and again, mixing it in and out, just sort of mousing it as I went in order to get some more strangeness. Then you wind up here with what winds up being the piece. I'm weaving again between the vocal takes, and like the guitar, I allowed myself to have a little bit of overlap as long as it was subtle and sounded like mostly it could be just one voice, or again, some mythical figure that has a way of maybe making some pitches to it once. To be fair, some of it is layering, and some of it is stuff I was able to do just on the fly by mousing around with that reverse delay and catching a piece in the freeze mode. So some of it is vocal technique, some of it is effects on the fly, some of it is layer it up. So that's how I did the lyre guitar and the vocals. And let's see how the piece turned out. I'll play you about a minute of the 4-minute piece, and I will also link a separate full-length video for anyone who wants to hear the whole thing as a separate video. Okay, so at this point, I always like to ask myself, was the experiment a success? And from the perspective of that, I was using Orpheus as a jumping off point to create a piece of music that was sort of a lyre and a vocal based piece, semi mythical, and touching on the idea of Jeff Buckley. Was it a success? And I would say the answer is yes, I did all of those things. The next question I would ask is, did I learn anything? And I would say, yeah, there are a few things that come to mind. The first thing is a sort of a refresher course in the idea of limitations. I have a whole video about using limitations to create a piece, and I will link that below. But in this case, it was using a guitar without the bar, using subtle effects on the guitar, but nothing radical like I'm used to doing, where the guitar winds up sounding nothing like a guitar. Something I like to do but didn't do here. Also, I recorded without a click, so that makes editing a little bit more complicated. But it works out that you just use the reverb and feel to sort of let one phrase flow to the other. I wound up going more towards a pantser than a plotter. I didn't sit down with this new tuning and write something specifically. I just kind of winged it. The other thing to note is that when you start out with an alternate tuning, it's very destabilizing the first few takes that I did. But the more I played with it, the more that my sort of mannerisms on guitar would creep in. So there's something to learn, which is that if you're going to use an alternate tuning to disorient yourself, that disorientation sort of effect is most prominent at the beginning and can degrade fairly quickly once you start to kind of learn the new landscape of where the notes are. The next thing I would say is about the vocals. Some of the effects that you're hearing, which might sound like they were the effects out of Guitar Rig, are actually just things I was doing with my voice. So that was kind of interesting that, you wind up getting sort of more bang for the buck than you might realize just from the source itself. I wound up sort of getting into some world music territory. There's something I did in there that's evocative of a quasi-Asian voice that's in Vangelis's score to Blade Runner. And I also wound up pulling into some sort of harmonic singing, which is kind of like a variation of the Tuvan throat singing, where you can actually produce two notes at once. Part of that was me doing it. Part of it was accentuated possibly by the formant filter. So that was interesting. Another thing I kind of want to keep in mind is that I usually sing very quietly, but when I sing full voice out, it allows your voice to move in ways and to hit things that are maybe a little bit more on the edge. You don't know if you're going to get it, or you might be surprised by the way the voice breaks, cracks, or expands. But you get some really interesting things there. And the last thing, my old teacher, Ivan Cherepnin, kind of flittered through my mind, because when I was doing private study with him, I had played a piece for him where I was doing some similar vocal stuff through a large reverb and had expressed some questions about my voice. And he said, no, you're actually doing really interesting things with your voice. He's possibly the only person who's ever said such a thing to me, and he's a person that I respect a lot. I don't know if he was just being nice. I don't think he was. But that sort of popped up in my mind while I was doing this, as kind of hearing a vote of confidence from Ivan, who passed, at a very young age, unfortunately. The last thing I would talk about is the idea of evoking music through using a persona. Here, I had both Orpheus and Jeff Buckley very much on mind. And so that drove performances out of me that might not have happened otherwise. I think it's interesting to consider persona. I certainly will do another longer video about the idea of inhabiting one or more alternate personalities. It's a very commonplace thing. You'll see with artists, music artists, people like David Bowie, who not only take on a new name, but a new persona, and then create music based on the persona they've created. And Bowie's an interesting example because he's David Jones, then he's David Bowie, this persona that he created. Then he also created other personas within the Bowie persona, like the Thin White Duke, Aladdin Sane, and these other ones, which raises interesting questions about who's doing what and at what point, and is it possible to become trapped in a persona in such a way that it actually ceases to become productive and could actually become harmful. But these are very large questions that are going to take more than one video. I hope you enjoyed my evocation of the Orpheus myth. I'm going to put a link to a full length version of the piece, which is about 4 minutes. I'd ask to like and subscribe if that's the kind of thing that you do, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. Stay mythical. Okay, take care.